Okay. It's 6 o'clock. Welcome, everyone. Excuse me. Welcome to the regular council meeting of February 27th, 2023. Just so that everyone knows, the meeting is being recorded tonight, and members from the public can be present as well as they can join online. And the Zoom link is on the city website. So we have two adoption of minutes before us. The first set of minutes is a Governance and Operations Committee meeting from February 13th, 2023. And the second set of minutes is the regular council meeting from February 13th, 2023. Can I have someone make that recommendation? Motion. Thank you, Councillor Benson and Councillor Wilson. All those in favor? Thank you, carried unanimously. So tonight we have two delegations with us, and I'd like to call the first delegation up, and that is the Lower Columbia Community Health Center Network Society. So if you would like to come up front and give your name and address, please, before you start your presentation.
Sure, my name is Dr. Tobias Gelber. My address is 2010 George Street in Rossland. I don't know if you have a society address.
No, we don't.
No. So I don't know if that has to be a trail address. But so I'm here for two reasons and as part of the presentation. But first off, I guess I'd like to introduce the rest of the members that are here to help support this. So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Linda Sachenko from Trail.
I'm Carolyn Amantea, and although I am a Warfield Village Councillor, I am here as a community member and a member of the community engagement team for this project.
My name is Diana Daghofer, and I'm representing Rossland Network.
My name is Mary McGinnis, and I represent Area B in Oasis.
Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. So the first thing I'd like to do is to offer a progress update on the Lower Columbia Health Network Initiative. I understand that many of the councillors here are new, and so I'd like to be able to provide a bit of an overview of what we're about and an update for those that were here before, and then put in a request for a board member for the Lower Columbia Health Network Initiative. So to back up a little ways, a community health center, just to start with, is a not-for-profit clinic that includes a multidisciplinary team as well as healthcare providers you might normally associate with regular primary care. So what we'd be looking at is a team that is comprised of nurses and dietitians and social workers and pharmacists and physicians and nurse practitioners and admin and IT and a whole bunch of different people working under the same roof who would then be able to meet the healthcare needs of the community. So that is what we are striving for. That differs from the usual physician-led, physician-owned primary care clinics, which essentially operate like small businesses. Therefore, they're trying to optimize income and minimize overhead. And therefore, we work in typically very small environments with very few staff and not a lot of supports. And as you probably heard in the news these days, that sort of model isn't exactly meeting the needs of the physicians or the population. And so primary care is in a bit of a crisis. This is, comes in the setting also of about 30% of the population of the Lower Columbia area not having a family physician. Therefore, they are meeting their needs through accessing the emergency department, through walking clinics. Often they have to go out of town for those walking clinics, or through some of the virtual clinics run by some large organizations that are in the province and internationally. And so in order to optimize their delivery of care and try and meet the needs of all of those patients, we are putting forward this idea of a community health center. We have been meeting as a group of both community members, some physicians, some healthcare leaders, to be able to put forward the skeleton of what this community health center can look like. And as it stands right now, we have put forward a model, and a proposal has been submitted to government along with budget. That was put in September, and we are still awaiting to hear whether or not this is something the government is willing to fund. We have met with Katrine Conroy, who has been supportive of this kind of project, but as you can imagine with her appointment, she's very busy these days. We have also gone through all of the necessary governance to be able to form a society. And so as such, the board of directors that we are proposing is going to be comprised of 11 members. I believe 6 of those are going to be representing the various areas of the Lower Columbia. So we've got areas A and B, and so Mary is one of those representatives. We have the 5 communities of, I'm sure I get these right, I'm new here, of Fruitvale and Montrose and Trail and Warfield and Rossland. And so members from each of those. Then we will also have, once those groups have nominated members and the first board is created, there will be 3 more members at large. There's an Aboriginal member as well, and that forms a board of 11, if I'm not mistaken. So the request for tonight is to put a request to you guys as councillors to appoint somebody to represent the community of Trail within the on the CHC board. It doesn't have to be a council member, it can be. Certainly some have chosen to do that, others have not. But we would put it forward for your consideration to be able to nominate somebody to be on that board. As far as timing goes, again, we haven't been approved, so we are continuing to move forward with the society, but we don't exactly have a project that's guaranteed to happen. We're optimistic, but you never know with these sort of things. And so we'd be hoping sometime in the next 6 or 8 weeks that we would be able to have a name so that we can start the onboarding and orientation process for the board. Anything else to add from you guys?
I think the only thing I would add is we've actually been meeting, I think the first discussion was in November 2019, when we recognized what a crisis was happening in the communities around primary care. And just to give you a sense of the urgency, at that time, I think that the unattached numbers were around 17 to 19%. And as Tobias has just said, they're now sitting up around 30%. So we know we have a whole lot of people in our communities who aren't getting good access to primary health care. And this is a model that's been around for some 50 years across the country. Community health centers aren't new, but it's a concept that is believed to provide very good care to the community and also act as a really good recruitment tool for healthcare professionals. We're lucky Tobias has joined our communities. He's in Rossland, but he came from Alberta and is committed to that community health center concept. So we think it's the way to go. We hope we'll get government approval, and we look forward to Trail Council giving us a director name and continuing to support us.
And just one more thing I think that we left out. So in recruitment for a board member, there is a job ad or a want ad per se. I believe Jen Schmidt has that copy.
Oh, right.
She's
Yes.
our project manager, and so she'd be happy to forward it to City Hall. So that could be advertised on your City Hall website, or you could do it internally. I think there is some feeling that it shouldn't necessarily be someone who is a council member or mayor presently. If you get to that point, I think Montrose has delegated someone from their council to join the committee, but other than that, we're looking outside the village of Warfield. Will be represented by Alison Fines, who is a resident with some very strong medical background. So we'll just make sure that Jen forwards that on to the city office to put that up for your consideration.
Okay.
Any questions about CHCs, where we're at? What we're asking? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Okay. So, on to the next delegation. Deanna, from the Community Action.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. This time on your agenda today. I know that a number of you have already been to at least one of our meetings, so I'll be brief on the intro and get to what it is I'd like to ask of you. Just for those who don't know, we're a collective. We're not an incorporated society, but we are made up of groups like Mamas Stop Harm, Anchors, which provides overdose prevention services and harm reduction in Nelson, as well as Cranbrook and the area. Career Development Services that operates the shelter. REDUN, which is the Rural Empowered Drug Users Network, along with the United Church and a number of individuals, including a nurse educator, youth representative who's doing work at Dale Crow, nursing students we work with on a regular basis in their fourth-year projects. And we've been around for about 2 years, so we're starting to develop some traction. You may know that we had a workshop on Saturday this past weekend, and we had almost 60 people, 59 people come out for it, so we're pretty pleased with that turnout. Our aim is to reduce the harms from the toxic drug supply, both to individuals and our community. And specifically, we work to reduce the stigma towards people who use drugs in our community. We advocate for drug policy reform and better support services, including a supportive housing building. And we really feel we need an overdose prevention site. Just briefly, some of you may have seen these stats before, but these are deaths due to toxic drugs. We made a little bit of gain in 2019 before the pandemic hit, and that was totally lost. We're on track to almost meet the largest death rate yet from toxic drugs. Drug toxicity is the leading cause of death for people aged 19 to 39 years of age, all causes. So this is absolutely a public health emergency, and we are pretty despondent that it's not being treated as an emergency. So what's killing people? The drug of choice on the streets these days is fentanyl. They're present in almost all of these samples that are tested. Anchors does drug testing on a regular basis in Trail as well as Nelson and other communities. And yeah, deaths that are the result of toxic drugs, 85% of those include fentanyl. If you aren't familiar with it, it's a drug that's 50 times stronger than heroin, 100 times stronger than morphine. It's very cheap and easy to make, so it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere in our society now. It's also laced with benzodiazepines, which are also highly addictive and don't respond to naloxone and Narcan. So that's a serious issue as far as suppressing people's respiratory systems. And stigma kills people. Stigma prevents people from seeking the help that they need. So that's a big part of our work. 3 out of 4 people who die are young men, and almost half of them, 30 to 50%, work in the trades. That's also a target of our work. What we have locally is an opioid agonist therapy program that's run by Interior Health. We have mental health and addiction counseling support in Trail and Castlegar. We have a 5-day detox facility in Castlegar. Unfortunately, when people are released from detox, there's really support for them in the community to go back to their previous living conditions, and often it's extremely difficult to remain off the drug that they're using. Publicly funded residential treatment, it has a significant waiting list, and it's either in Kelowna or Vancouver. And again, there's so little support, it's almost a waste of money. People are literally given a bus ticket back to their home community at the door and sent out. And it's just extremely difficult for practitioners to be able to stabilize a person in the short amount of time that they're under care. So critical gaps in the community, an overdose prevention site, as I mentioned before. We certainly need supportive housing with all of the health and mental health supports that are included in that. We need public bathrooms. People do not have a place to go to the bathroom outside of regular hours where the library may be open, or the Civic Center. And we've spoken with Colin McClure, and we understand that there are challenges, and we're very happy to work with the city to try to overcome those and make bathrooms available to people. I believe you were given a proposal from Selkirk College nursing students in November on storage lockers. That's another issue. We use police resources to pick up people's goods and move them along. And really people need somewhere to store their things. Not only to have a storage place, but walking around the community with all your goods with you marks you as somebody who is unhoused and makes you a target for stigma as well. So there's a lot of good reasons that I know the students have put into their proposal, and they've not heard anything back from council. So I'd like to know what your thinking is on that. I'm just going to talk a little bit about what an overdose prevention site does. It's indoor or outdoor space where people are monitored who use drugs and are guided by trained staff. They're provided with drug testing services there, trained staff, as I mentioned, harm reduction supplies, counseling and substance use referrals. There are some health services depending on the budget of the OPS. We've had overdose prevention sites since Insight was established in 2003. So we've got 20 years of evidence from the OPSs and know their effectiveness. In the last few months, the first death at an OPS was reported, but in the previous 20 years, there have been no deaths. And no illicit drug deaths have been reported due to prescribed safe supply, which is another harm reduction approach that's being used. Insight was heavily evaluated, and in the time that it ran, almost a quarter of the people there. At that point, injection was the more common way of delivery of drugs. Now inhalation is about 70 to 75% of people inhale the drugs rather than inject them. But at that time, they were successful in cutting the number of people who were using drugs. The community noticed improvements through fewer needles and litter around, there were fewer calls on emergency services, less spread of infectious diseases, and crimes that are often associated with drug use decreased. So as I said, toxic drugs are the leading cause of death among young people. The death rate in our area is 33, it's Interior Health, 33 out of 100,000 people versus 5 out of 100,000 10 years ago. So the rate has gone up exponentially. We have a number of groups, Selkirk College, along with Interior Health and the shelter, have outreach workers, and they attend to 20 to 30 opioid incidents per month. So looking at the stats of overdose deaths by the number of people who use drugs, we figure that probably 130 to 200 people could benefit on an ongoing basis from an overdose prevention site in Trail. It costs about $100,000 a year to run an OPS, mostly in wages. And then the other piece of work that we're doing is on stigma. We have a number of events and initiatives under the Respect and Connect banner. Stigma is really the attitudes and approaches that people take to others in our community because of who they are, their circumstances in life. It can mean that people can't find jobs, they can't maintain housing, it makes them reluctant to identify themselves. We know that in the OAT practice, for example, about 75% of the people who take part in that therapy have homes and jobs and seem like normal citizens. So, normal, in quotes. So stigma is probably the main reason that those folks use their drugs alone, don't tell anyone about it, don't seek support. And 83% of people who die from toxic drugs die inside homes, over half of them in private residences. So we know that people are hiding because we treat different drugs differently in our society. Caffeine is a very common drug that everyone uses. Alcohol is encouraged in our society. Other drugs aren't. And these folks that use those drugs generally come from some sort of trauma and they're penalized for that mental health. or mental illness. So generally, we're trying to reduce stigma. We're educating the public and local businesses. The events that we run, we are also providing to businesses on an ad hoc basis. Anyone who wants us to come to present to their businesses, we will do that. We were very pleased with the turnout from the public and saw a lot of new faces, which is great to see the word getting out. We want to be able to talk to people about an overdose prevention site. I know some people are concerned about that. We know that having people in a regulated facility where they're being monitored reduces problems in the community significantly. So trying to get that message out and generally restore feelings of safety among people in trail who I think are very disturbed by what they're seeing and have fear around it. So we're using social media, our speaker series, training. As I said, we have a youth member who's doing work in high school, along with events for specific things. And some of you may be familiar with our series this year. The budget for that work is about $40,000 a year, and most of that is through a part-time social media person who helps us with our training as well. So how can the city help? We certainly are looking for your support for an overdose prevention site. I have a copy here of the order of the Minister of Health that was issued on December 9th, 2016. And in that, he talks about the fact that there has been an emergency declared around the opioid crisis and the fact that overdose prevention services, that the regional health boards are to provide overdose health prevention services for the purposes of monitoring people who are at risk of overdose, providing rapid intervention as and when necessary in any place there is a need for these services. And I'm pretty sure that we can demonstrate a strong need here. So I was very surprised to hear at the presentation talking about the shelter that Jane Power was unaware of the request for an overdose prevention site in Trail, and I would like to strongly urge council and the mayor to send a formal request to Interior Health. Sorry, that should be IH, not HR. Because they are responsible for making this happen, and Anchors works closely with them in Nelson and Cranbrook, and is certainly ready and willing to work with them here in Trail. Bathrooms, there was a survey done of people who use drugs in our community around an overdose prevention site, and the two top requests were to have an OPS and to have bathrooms. So please pay attention to that. Talk about lockers, and I'd also like to request that you provide some funding towards our anti-stigma work. Last year, the Trail Community Safety Task Force provided a $10,000 grant. I don't know if that's annual funding to that committee or what the process is to make a request. Last time it went through the mayor who supported that request. So I appreciate some guidance on how we might be able to access that or other funds from the city. Do you have any questions, comments?
So Deanna, I have a question. The amount of time that we have for detox in Castlegar, is that sufficient to get them to the rehab? Like the gap in there, is that where we're losing them, or is it just not having the rehab
We don't have rehab
available in this
I
area?
think I'm not a medical practitioner, so this is just from what I'm hearing from medical practitioners. 5 days generally is sufficient for detox, generally because people are aware that they're going into that process, and we'll work with the OAT practitioners to prepare for it. So I don't think that that's a critical need. It's the fact that there's nothing available when that's done.
Council, any other questions, or Councilor Wilson?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Councilor Campbell.
Oh, sorry, Councilor Wilson. No, just one point or one question. Critical gaps. Why wouldn't the lack of treatment center be a critical gap mentioned in your summary? Just a suggestion, because to me it's very obvious that it is a very critical gap.
Yeah, I think what we were looking at more immediate needs that will, stop the deaths that are going on. Absolutely, I think we need a treatment center. I think it's important that that conversation takes place with Interior Health and Anchors and people who do this business on a daily basis. So I'm probably not the right person to answer that question as far as what the best model is for treatment in our community, but you have a phone call tomorrow with Anchors, so we'll dive into that.
Thank you.
It's further to the email that I sent you. I'm just curious as to how we could also get Roslyn to help out or Fruitvale to help out. I mean, I know we had gone back and forth just in a few emails, but I just thought, is there a way to get this to help with the surrounding municipalities on this?
The city of Roslyn also gave us a $10,000 grant last year, and we'll make another request to them, so they are funding us. As far as putting services in those communities, again, I'm not the expert on that, and might be something that we would have in the community health center, I would expect, as he nods at the room. So I think that's a question that needs to take place with health providers in the community.
No.
More detail.
That's okay.
Are you okay if I ask Dr. Gilbert to answer that question?
Of course.
Yeah, absolutely. So just going back to Councilor Cashell's comment there, many times in health resources in the Lower Columbia, I'm learning, because I'm relatively new here, is we actually share resources between the different centers. So for example, I work at the maternity center as well. Any woman who's pregnant who needs an iron infusion doesn't get that, regardless of where they live. They don't get that through Trail. They have to go to Castro for that. And that's just a health resource thing because the Trail Emerge is so busy that they've got time and space to do that there. And so right now with the detox center, there may be sufficient resources to be able to have everyone go there. But then the next step from what I'm hearing is that once they're detoxed, so now they are not withdrawing from their narcotic anymore, but nothing has changed in their life aside from the fact that now they're not completely hooked on it. They don't have the next step, which would be some form of rehabilitation longer term. And so that is one of the gaps. Also, what I'm hearing is that for the status quo, what they're using, what they're needing is just the basics of human living, things like bathrooms and that sort of thing, locally. But as far as the detox right now here in town, yes, ideally that would be great. Do we need it immediately? No, there's probably some other steps that could help things first a little bit.
And just to build on that, detox will reduce the physical dependency, but a lot of drug use is an entire culture. And unless you break that culture, unless you provide another, avenue of life for a person, you've only really addressed a small part of the addiction.
Okay. Sorry, there was a second question there.
It was just about getting, I guess, support from surrounding municipalities on this to maybe tackle it together.
Right, and so the CHCs, I didn't get a chance to fully expand on that. The CHC is meant to be over 4 sites. So Rossland, 2 in Trail, and 1 in Fruitvale. And so by joining those 4 forces together, we may have one that is more centered. So the 2 in Trail are right now proposed to be 1 in sort of the downtown core somewhere, and 1 in maybe out near Juanita. And so each of those sites evaluates the population that they serve, and they determine the makeup of their team. And so there may be one, let's say maybe the downtown Trail one, that might be more focused on substance abuse and the resources necessary for that, and then resources from the others can come to help support that.
Thank you.
It's a longer term
Thank
solution.
you. Thanks for that information. Okay, any other, Councillor Vincent?
When looking at like overdose prevention sites and knowing that the change has been from injecting to inhalation, are they looking at one with like, would it be like properly ventilated for?
It's either an outdoor space, and tents are often used for ventilation.
Okay.
Or if it's an indoor space, it needs to have special ventilation in it.
And then just one more, but just out of interest, did the study show why there is an increase in with male in trades Robin?
They talk a lot about the culture of trades, you know, it's work hard, party hard. Often if we're looking at work camps, you know, there's very little other activity going on. There are people in a work location. Yeah, a lot of it tends to be cultural. And there is more information I can get you on that. There's some great resources online about geared to the trades specifically.
And I attended the homeless de-escalation training on
Oh,
Saturday. I
right.
thought it was really great.
Good, I didn't see you there. Awesome, thank you.
Okay, all right, there's no, thank you, Dan.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much. Okay, next item on the agenda is public question period.
I have a question,
Okay,
well, more of a statement.
so Mark,
It's about this.
yeah, if you could, just say your name and address,
My
where
name
to
is Mark
get that.
Steves. My address is 140 Johnson Road in Fruitvale. I own a business here in Trail, which is at 947 Spoke. 34 years ago, I detoxed from heroin. I was an IV heroin user. And it took me not longer than 5 days to get detoxed from heroin. With what they're taking today, 5 days isn't enough. And that's just my opinion from my experience. I think detox is extremely necessary. I think that there should be a holding facility after they go through their 5 days of detox where they're held and placed in treatment. That's how it was done for me, and it worked. Here I am 34 years later, running my own business and a responsible member of our community. I honestly don't think catering to use is the way to go. I was in Vancouver when the first one opened in Canada, and I had been there, done that. 90% of the addicts that I knew at the time refused to use it because there was a lack of trust. I don't know how that would be received here, but I don't think that would be a good process for our community. What we're doing is we are perpetuating the life of user when we do stuff like this, and I think it's gotta stop, right? I don't think our community can handle, like we're not big enough, we don't have the resources to handle a treatment center, because I know if you build a treatment center here, other jurisdictions will ship people here to that treatment center. Right, that's just how it works. When I went through my treatment, I went to Union Gospel Mission, they detoxed me, they held me there, I ended up working in their kitchen for about 4 weeks. And by the time I got out of there, and they had me placed in treatment, I had my stuff together. You know, I could think again. It took me 6 weeks to get clean. And it took me, it's a 90-day treatment, and I went through 2 of them. It kept me an extra 90 days to get my poop together. I don't think pandering to an addiction is the way to go. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Okay, so if there's no one else,
My name is Rich Steer, I'm on Fifth Avenue in East Trail. And I'm just here to get some feedback in regards to a letter I sent to the council on February 2nd regarding the 2023 assessments and property taxes. So you guys reviewed that letter and any thoughts, ideas, or?
I can honestly say that I don't believe I've seen that letter. I don't know if anybody on council has seen it.
Yeah, I sent it directly to the website, to the council, to everybody, so.
Okay, well, you know what? I will, I'll go back and have a look at it. I haven't seen it, honestly.
Okay,
So I'm-
yeah, February 2nd.
February 2nd, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Good.
Thanks for checking on that. Okay. That's it. Okay, we'll go on to the council committee reports. And the first one is Councilor Benson.
Thank you, Your Worship. On February 15th, I attended a workshop on the Columbia Basin Water Monitoring Framework with Living Lake in Canada. It was a review of what water monitoring is occurring versus what is missing to obtain a water balance for our region. Our current monitoring network is insufficient to monitor change from climate change. So Living Lake successfully piloted a framework project last year in the Upper Columbia Elk Valley, and they're working on the Lower Columbia region, which includes the areas surrounding the trail. I went to an in-person session, and they're having another one on Zoom on April 6th. On February 23rd, along with I think most other councillors, I attended a webinar put on by the Trail District Chamber of Commerce, Community Futures Greater Trail, the LCC DTS, and the LCIC. And these 4 groups gave an overview of their contributions to economic development in our area. It was a really good presentation, and it included at the end a really nice matrix so that at a glance you can see who does what. I find for myself, I get very confused with all the different groups and what they're working on, so I found this matrix very helpful. And then on February 25th, I attended the homeless de-escalation training. Like Diana said, there was over 50 people there. It was a 1-hour video where Ryan Dowd gave a great explanation on the 5 tools for de-escalation and how trauma can affect a person's behavior. Following that, along with Councillor Butler and Mayor Jones and Andrea Jolly and Sandy Lucchini, we walked 5 kilometers in the coldest night of the year, and it was a very cold night, as promised. So that is my report.
Thank you, Councillor Benson. Any questions or comments? No? Okay, thank you. On to Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. On the 16th, on behalf of council on the 16th, I attended the LCCTDS monthly meeting. Along with most of us, I also attended on the 23rd, the Community Economic Development webinar in our region, and on the 25th, along with yourself and Councillor Benson, attended the coldest night of the year. That's my report. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Any questions for Councillor Butler? Councillor Cashel.
Nothing to report, Mayor Jones.
Oh. Thank you. Councillor Cashel, on to, and Councillor Hanson has sent her regret. She's out of town. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. So I emailed everyone the updates on the Calvary Creek landfill upgrade and the Columbia Pollution Control Center upgrade. Just so everybody knows, we're going to try to arrange for a tour for council when spring finally does arrive, just so everybody can see what's going on there. I attended a meeting on behalf of council with the Historical Society today. And another thing I just want to bring up, and it's in the consent agenda eventually here, is that the regional district is looking for a letter from the City Trail not to oppose what's happened now with the Elections Canada's plans to realign the federal electoral boundaries. So I provided everybody with documentation on that, and I just would like to know if everybody's in support of that and if the city would be willing to send a letter of opposition as well. That's it for my report.
Okay. Now, Councillor Martin, did you want to make that a motion that you have the letter written on behalf of staff, or?
If possible, yes.
Yep. So,
We have it in the consent, or the letter that was sent.
Okay.
From
the
KD.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's in the consent agenda, so we'll wait until we get to that and pull out the portion of the.
There.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Martin. Any questions for Councillor Martin? And to Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Not much to report. I just want to thank everyone who has sent in emails regarding the proposed shelter location. Emails both for and against the location. I found them to be very helpful and informative to try to see both sides of the fence on that topic. So I thank you for everyone who has sent those in. That's all my report.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any questions for Councillor Wilson? Okay, on to my report. So I just wanted to report that myself and Councillor Hanson had an opportunity to visit with the Girl Guides of Canada, the Beaver Valley Pathfinders and Rangers. And right now the guys are working through their local government modules. So they had prepared some very, very tough questions and very thoughtful questions for Councillor Hanson and myself. And it was very, like, I was so impressed with their level of engagement and interest in the local politics. It was great to see so many young women that were involved and interested in it. And at the end, we actually got finished a little bit early, so they invited us to join in on a dance with them, and it was lots of fun to be involved that way. On February 23rd, I had a meeting with our MP, Richard Cannings. And in our discussion, I was very clear about how we need the federal government to provide more funding for housing and healthcare and social services. And I am sure that that's a comment that he's hearing throughout this area from elected officials. And it's important that he keeps working hard for us in that area. It was a very good meeting with him. I was glad to see him back in this area, spending some time in the communities. And I'm going to keep that connection going because we need to hear from him more often about what he's doing in for housing and healthcare, social services for this area. I was going to speak about the change in the boundaries, but now that Councillor Martin has done that, I'll move on to the, I chaired the Trail Health and Environment Committee on February 22nd, and we have some new members from the community and from the government level, so it was good to see that interest is still there from the government. I'm really looking forward to this committee because it's the work that this committee has done and the work that they're doing right now, it continues to make our community healthy and safe for everyone. I also attended the coldest night of the year, as Councillor Benson had mentioned, and it's the event was very well organized and everyone involved did a really good job, and we raised some really important funds for the vulnerable and the marginalized people in our community. But I have to say that, as Councillor Benson did say that it was a very cold night. And when I was walking back to my car with my hot chocolate in my hand, I started, you could see people on the street were starting to build their tents. And it was a really cold and windy and snowy night. And it was really made me uncomfortable to think that I just did this walk to raise funds to help these people out of the situation that they're in, and it's still, you know, it doesn't matter how much we do or how much we don't do, it's still there, it's in our community, and it's out of our control. I mean, it's across Canada, it's across the province, and it's something that each and every community is struggling with right now. I just want people to know that City Council and staff are working really hard to make our community a safe place for everyone. I personally reached out to our MLA several times to get some answers of what the next steps are going to be for a shelter. What are they looking at? Where can we move it? These conversations are really, really difficult, and they're necessary because we can't have this going on in our community. We can do better, and I know we can, and it's a really difficult situation. We do have a meeting set up with BC, we are working on a meeting with BC Housing, and those same difficult conversations have to take place at that table. We need help to make this community a better place, and I know that we can do it. I too wanted to thank everyone who reached out to us with ideas and suggestions. I mean, the phone calls and the emails and the comments when I go out in the streets, like people are sympathetic to what's going on and they wanna help. And I really appreciate, you know, them reaching out to me. And I know that we're all gonna work really hard on this issue. And when I say really hard, it's gonna be really hard work and we all gotta do it. And that's my report. Any questions or comments? Thank you. Okay, so,
Mayor, before we go on, I was wondering, I just got the letter from Mr. Steer, and it
Oh.
probably would be a bad timing, even for video wise, otherwise to answer some of these
okay,
questions.
sure. Yeah, thank you.
So, so Mr. Steer's question relates to assessments of property taxes. One question he talks about is that the assessed value he feels are based on speculative markets, and that may be true, but the city of Trail doesn't have any control of that. BC Assessment does that work. They're the ones, if you've got a challenge with what your assessed value is, you have that opportunity. Now, that would have been up until January 31st to make a question to have a review of your assessment. So that's one thing that is not anything really that the city of Trail has any involvement with. Now, the question is that his assessment has increased significantly, and he would not be the only property that has happened. But what really needs to be clear for the public is that just because the assessed value goes up does not mean the taxes go up. So as an example, if there was one home and it was assessed at $1,000 and we had let's say a 1% tax, so $10. Now next year, the assessment goes up to $2,000. So if we kept that, then obviously it would jump that 50%. 100%. So you go from 10 to 20. What actually happens is that we adjust the mill rate down so that you would first collect $10. So you would change from 1% to 0.5%. That's what the goal is on the finance side, to start on an even playing field. From there, now that you've dropped that tax rate, that would be when you would add your increase. So then if you had a 3% tax increase, that's what you would increase it to. You don't get to all of a sudden have a windfall of taxes because everyone's tax assessment goes up. Because that could work in one way, it might be really good for a municipality. But what happens when property values go the other way? All of a sudden you're looking for a big hole. So that's the number one thing that happens. Now, in a situation, for example, in 2022, the average was a 32% increase in assessed values from all properties and trails residential. So now if your property went up 40%, then your taxes would have gone up incrementally between the average of 32 and 40. Because as the pie got shared, there's one pie, and that portion now becomes more of yours because you are higher than the average. If your house, and there was no tax increase, you would get an automatic increase in the share. In the same way, say your property was only 20%, 20% still a big increase, you would actually see your taxes decrease. So that's why if you were in that perfect average home, in theory, you would just have whatever the tax increase was for that year, which I think last year was about 4.5%. Now, you might say, well, wait a second, my taxes actually went up higher than that. Well, one always has to remember when you get your tax notice, it does say City of Trail on top of it. Now, although it says City of Trail, we collect on behalf of a number of different entities. We collect on behalf of the school district, we have no control over it. We have some control over the RDKB, and then there's also the hospital tax. Now, what happens inside the City of Trail is that we have the ability to adjust the multiplier. So that means that because, say for example, major industry only had a 2% increase in their assessed value in 2022, the average residential was up 32%. Now, if we did not adjust the tax multiplier, that means that the sharing ratio of how we collect taxes for Trail would have been very lopsided. It would have been a big increase on the residential side. We adjust the multiplier to keep the collection structure that we do, to keep that the same. Now, we do not have the ability to do that in the school tax, the RDKB tax, or the hospital tax. So certainly in 2022, a resident would have noticed that their taxes for RDKB went up significantly, even though there was only overall, an overall $60,000 increase in the budget for RDKB services in 2022. There was a significant reallocation because residential properties went up 32%. Some of the other ones like utilities and the major industry, they were basically balanced or didn't change at all. So because they do not, because the rates for multiplier are set by the province, when that happens, that's when you start to see tax shifting. And that is certainly what happened in 2022. A large portion of the RDKB taxes got pushed onto residential from some of the other entities that we collect for. So that would be one of those pieces. One has to be very careful because you'd almost have to have your tax notice from 2021, your tax notice from 2022. You have to go along each line and be able to go, okay, what did I pay for my taxes for the hospital? What did I pay for my regional district? What did I pay for my trail? And what did I pay for the school? And that's the only way you can really get a comparative. Some of them, yes, you absolutely have control over, but just to be clear, just because increases went up significantly, that is not a cash windfall for the city. And it can cause it can cause a tax reallocation in school taxes, hospital taxes, and regional district taxes. And we'll expect to see that again in 2023 because we're noticing that there's not much change in the taxes for commercial or for the major industry, but there is for residential. One other thing that I will note is that notice that I think your increase in your assessed value is 10% this year. The average is 17, which actually means that your property more than likely on the trail municipal tax portion will likely drop as compared to last year. Because the average is 17%, your assessed value only went up 10%. So someone that's got, say, 30% is going to pick up the difference between yours dropping and theirs being higher.
Well,
and it might be easier, Mr. Stewart. You're more than welcome to come into my office and I can show you how the numbers work.
I'm not disagreeing on the numbers, but I'm saying, like, even like last year, 2021, 2022, my house assessment went up 38%,
Yep.
and the property city taxes went up 11%, just on the property taxes, let alone the 2022, the water sewer, the service utilities even went up. I mean, they've gone up almost every year except for since 2004, which actually dropped a little bit. Every year since 1999, they've increased, and actually almost doubled. But I mean, I've gone through comparisons to last year, the year before, 2020, 2021, with a 10% increase.
But 38, yours went up 38%, average was 32. So you're automatically getting a higher amount of the portion of taxes and an order to tax increase. So again, if you were just looking at your trail municipal taxes, that would be a factor. Again, if you're just looking at the bottom, you have to also count into the fact that unless you're doing a comparison for every single one we collect taxes for, that can be a challenge because it's really hard for a municipality because they set a tax rate and it's just for the municipal taxes. But when you get that tax bill as an owner, it's got everyone's taxes on there. And you look at the bottom and you go, my taxes have gone up 11%. There's even times when people's residential may go down for the trail, your residential trail, but your EBK taxes may go up or your school taxes may go up. So again, you have to take into consideration that we are collecting on behalf of a number of different entities. And again, happy to have you come to my office and we can. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time. I think it's important because there's many people that will have got their assessed values and seen taxes go up, and it's we'll have more when we talk budget and show the slides on where things get down.
Yeah, no, it is important because it's very confusing for some people, for sure. Okay, so on the consent agenda, we have 3 items. The first one is the Trail United Church coupon program. The second is the Trail and District Public Library 2022 fourth quarter report. And the third item is the Regional District of Kootenay Boundary Border Federal Electoral District Boundary Review. So is anybody want to pull anything from the consent agenda? Councilor Martin?
When I get an opportunity, 5.3.
Okay. And is there, anyone else? Can I get a motion for the 5.3 consent agenda to be pulled? Councilor Martin Benson, all those in favor? Unanimously approved. So in the 5.3, the Federal Electoral District Boundary Review, there is a letter attached here where we are asked or are, sorry, I'm trying to get to that page, where there's a letter here from the chair of the regional district about the boundary changes. Councilor Martin, did you want to speak on that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor George. Just a little background. Richard Canning's MP for South Okanagan, or West Coast, excuse me, he wrote a letter to the regional district to bring the attention. I'm just going to read the portions of the letter here. We want to bring to the attention the latest draft of Elections Canada plans for redistribution of federal electoral district boundaries. And just to further give you some briefing about that, it would be the removal of electoral area A and the villages of Montrose and Fruitvale from the same electoral district as the rest of the regional district. And also, just for explanation, a bit further into it, on the west side of Grand Forks, which is area E of the regional district, would be split as those communities just south of Beaverdale and extending north to Big White would now be part of the Kelowna district. So on behalf of the regional district, just asking for support in opposing the changes if the city wishes to elaborate.
Okay. So, Mr. McClure, do you have to make a motion on that?
I think it'd be great if you
Yes,
want to make a
okay.
motion that staff prepare a letter in line with what RDTV has
In
said.
favor of that? Okay, Councilor Wilson, all those in favor?
Just by the, could you start by the March 6th deadline?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilor Butler. So all those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay, thank you, everyone. Next item up is new business. Is there any new business from council? No? Okay. Next item on the agenda is adjournment. And so we'll make that Councilor Benson, Councilor Wilson, all those in favor? Opposed? No, I'm just kidding. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone.